Hey, what's up? You're tuned into The Cutting Room, the show where we talk to industry-leading marketing professionals about their content marketing philosophy, process, and pregame before they edit an article live. I'm your host, Tommy Walker, and thank you so much for tuning in. My guest today is Alaura Weaver. She is the Director of Content and Community over at Writer.com, an amazing AI writing tool, something you haven't really seen before because it trains on your voice and tone, which is something that I'm really looking forward to digging into because of the amount of time it takes and how I need a robot to clone my own voice to do some really good follow-up stuff here. Before that, she was also at Animals, one of the industry-leading content marketing agencies, and has had a really great career. Something that we really connected on that I'm very excited about is she also has an acting background. So this whole idea of storytelling and obstacles and character work and all of this other stuff, lots of really cool things to be going off of here. So I don't want to take too much longer. Before we get started, I do want to make a plug for our sponsor, Content Harmony, an excellent brief writing tool, highly recommended. Again, there's some AI assist in there and has sped up my own brief writing process by at least 2 to 4 hours, depending on the brief. So something really cool worth checking out. In the middle of the show, while we're getting ready for the edit, you can see a quick little spot for it. And yeah, if you like it, you can also get 2 months of free credits if you sign up through our link. That said, Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tommy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm just going to jump straight into it. Tell me about your content marketing philosophy and how has it evolved over time?
So right now, my philosophy, or my ethos, as I call it, is first of all, that content marketing is actually human-centered design. And what I mean by that is when you take a design thinking approach, meaning that you start with empathy, you bring listening to people and their problems into play, then you brainstorm, come up with solutions, meaning the content as a solution, and then experiment with that and then get feedback. I mean, that's the entire design thinking process right there. When you do that, you're going to get better results and also drive more connections between your brand and your audience. So that's one of the places that I just like, okay, this is the approach that I want to take. I also, because it's human-centered design, it's like, well, how do you speak human? And that's through storytelling. So speaking human equals storytelling. And storytelling is kind of a buzzy word in marketing, has been for a while. People kind of roll their eyes when they hear storytelling because it's so nebulous. But what I love, and as you know, coming from a theater background, is that story has a very specific structure. And it's a framework that you get to play within and bring creativity to. But in order for you to understand the story that your audience is trying to tell, you have to listen to where they're struggling. And that's where you just posted a quote as we were talking yesterday to get ready for this, that the story, you have to look for the struggle. Once you find where people are struggling, you will hear their story. You'll understand how it's impacting their life. And you'll understand what solutions they're trying out to get out of that struggle. That's huge fuel for marketing. Something else in terms of like finding where are people telling their stories? Well, communities are where people are telling their stories. So another part of my ethos is communities are idea engines. They are just brimming with conversations where people are seeking help, seeking support, seeking encouragement, seeking connection about their shared struggles and discoveries. And then finally, and this is my super nerdy part, is once you have all of these stories, well, what do you do with them? You need scalable frameworks that you can repeat. And again, with that theater background, as long as you have a framework in place, you'll have room for creativity, room for bespoke content that you're creating that feels very individualized and relevant, hyper relevant to your audience's life. So there you have it. That's my content philosophy in a nutshell.
I love it. Now, I would be remiss to not ask, or remiss to ask. See, I need an AI to like ask to correct my voice while I'm live. How is AI playing a role in the human centricity of the stories that we're telling?
Because the business landscape that we are living in, unfortunately, is not conducive to human life. As we are struggling and striving to stay ahead of innovation, stay ahead of our competitors, we are burning ourselves out. And that's because we're using unscalable processes. When you bring AI into that framework, the AI is there supporting that process, giving you room to bring your unique human fingerprint to the content. Somebody really liked what I said on a recent LinkedIn post about how there are risks involved in publishing AI content as is. We've all had conversations about this. And it's like people who are actually working in AI at companies that have AI products are screaming, especially at Writer, don't publish raw AI content. That's like, you're not going to compete with, eventually you're going to just be competing robot to robot. And that's absurd. Who wants to live in that world? No, this is clay. The AI content is clay for you to shape and put your fingerprints all over and make your style.
Now, how are you doing that? Like on a day-to-day basis, right? How are you doing that? Like, and some of this we'll look at Writer a little bit later. Actually, there's going to be a bonus part here where we can go through the actual Writer part of the writing process. But yeah, how is that? How are you doing that?
So I, again, had the privilege to work at animals, and like the beauty of working at animals is they have a beautiful, laid out, repeatable process for producing volumes of content every day, delivering dozens of pieces of content every day to clients. So when you have that process, which we'll talk through when we do go through the live edit, where in that process you can automate things. Like, for example, there's something called the 10% outline, which is just basically, here's the topic, here's the rough structure of the piece that I want. You're not putting in like where your points are or what argument you're trying to make or anything like that. You just know, here's what I want to cover. If you feed that 10% outline to an AI tool, it can spit out a 30% outline for you with suggested points. And with our product, you can decide whether or not you want to use those. You can reject it, have it regenerate ideas. So eventually it gets to a point where you have an outline that, okay, I can take this and run with it, right? So that's an automated thing right there. Like I think within the content marketing world, at least right now with the SEO, there are frameworks and structures that are conducive to SEO content. And that's where AI can really help is create those structures and format things in a way that makes it conducive to SEO content. That doesn't take a lot of human creativity to do, right? Then take it from there. So you've got like basically the skeleton of a piece of content, and then you can move in. If you have a 30% outline, you can bring in the human elements that really make things driven by stories, driven by authoritative voice and thought leadership. And that's where you say, okay, at this point in this outline that the AI has generated for me, I see an opportunity for me to go out and get an SME interview, some quotes here. I can go off and do research on like, are there any reports? Or is this an idea for a report for us to produce, right? So you're riffing off of that. And again, bringing your creativity into it. And that's just the outline stage, okay? So after that, you're identifying, okay, here's where I'm gonna bring myself into this. 90% draft. You can either have the AI, do an entire, I don't do it this way. I don't think it's a good idea, is just generate an entire draft based on that outline.
Mm-hmm.
Or you take section by section and you have the AI generate, again, basic language that you can riff off of, because you're like, here's the idea. I want you to draft copy based on this idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, oh, you know what would be cool here? Let's try this out in the voice of David Sedaris, right? Let's try, just like bringing creative elements that an AI product wouldn't think to do. And that's where your human creativity does. And also you're saying, you know what? This seems like a really obvious statement that our audience would be like, duh, let's take this out, or let's find a new spin on this. Where can we bring something new, as opposed to repeating, copying, pasting the same ideas, and where you have a world that's just robot-driven content competing against robot-driven content.
Now, I'm just diving into Writer because of the conversation that we've been having, and I'm really looking forward to this. I have started using AI in my own process, and what I've found is that it is really good at creating the outline. And the other part that I've found is really helpful is also asking, like, hey, if you've created an outline on your own, hey, are there any points that I missed, right? Because there's this, like, it has a broader understanding of a subject because of the training data that it's been on. And I think that's really cool. And then, I've started to also like track my edits and like, hey, help me, word economy and all of that. And then if there are areas where I'm like, hey, can I be a little bit more snarky here? Right? Like, how can you rewrite to be snarky? Like, bring a little bit more of that personality out of it. Because sometimes, let's be honest, like, we're just not feeling it some days. Like, we can't always be on.
If you're not really connected to a topic, no,
Right.
And then you have to bring a fresh perspective, and maybe just like let the AI handle the boring part, and then you can say, you know what, let's just experiment with, and improvise and see what comes out. And if it seems like a crazy, untenable idea, probably even better, because nobody will have thought of that, and that's how you stand out and engage with your audience.
Now, how are you preventing yourself from becoming lazy? Because it can be easy to become lazy in the process, yeah?
Mm.
Or let me rephrase that. I'm seeing some people becoming over reliant on it because of the convenience.
Oh, sure.
What would you say to somebody who's becoming over reliant?
If you're becoming over reliant on it, then the results will speak for themselves, right? You're bringing mediocre content. If you're like, for example, a freelancer who's just like, oh, sweet, I can just spin up an SEO article and deliver it to my client and charge them thousands of dollars for the same type of work that I would have been paying, right? Or I would have been doing. Then first of all, you're not charging your client for the right thing. You should be charging your client for the outcomes that they're trying to get from this piece. And if you cannot justify the quality of your content with the outcomes that you're getting, then you're going to lose clients. And the same thing with your company content marketing. If you're producing generic robot written content, then you're going to lose your audience, and it's not worth the investment. Lazy content, regardless of whether it's written by AI or by a mediocre writer who's just following what everybody else on the first page of rankings is doing, it's mediocre results.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard part. And there's actually, so Mega has got a question in the comments here. But from what I've seen, and this is the hard part, is that there are a lot of authors, there's a lot of content out there, and I hate to say this, but it is indistinguishable from what a just prompt from the AI says. And the problem with that is that AI is not going to give you grammar errors. AI is not going to give you spelling errors. There's going to be a little bit more of a cohesive structure to some of the stuff. So a lot of those sort of issues, I think, can displace people who aren't working on their craft, right? The craft of writing.
Now, they're doing task work, but they're not doing creative work.
Right. Now, the question is what do you think about the impact of AI on freelancers? Would companies reduce the pay? I've got my own thoughts on that, but
well, I mean, I built my career on freelancing, so I have a deep respect and sense of support and encouragement to anybody who's out there freelancing and working their butts off to, it's an unstable career in many cases. But that means it. I learned early on as a freelancer, because I started out in a content mill, that if you are already bringing craft to the work, the clients will recognize that and say, you're worth more than the average content mill writer, and you're worth more than an AI tool, right? And again, if a company is choosing to invest in AI instead of people, the results will speak for themselves.
I would want to add to that too, that if a company is going to go the AI route versus the human writer route, that's not the best client. Like, just straight up, like,
no, it's not.
That's not somebody that you would want to be involved with if you're a freelancer.
Absolutely. And I mean, the same thing could be said for when people were like, I will go to Fiverr because I don't want to pay, or I'm going to outsource from developing countries.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that people from developing countries should be paid as much as person who lives in a Western country. Yeah. It's just there's an inherent bias there that is not about the freelancer, and it's about the values of the people who are doing the hiring.
Yeah, and that part in particular, like the I'm going to pay less because, and it doesn't matter what that reason is in general. That's just crappy, right? Like that's not somebody that's like, that wouldn't be somebody that I would want to do business with in general. No. Now, granted, having come from a freelance background myself, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, right?
Right.
But the thing that I would say is that, right now the popular one is ChatGPT, right? It is free for folks to use. There are ways that you can use that to check your work. I like to role play with the AI to say, like, hey, you are whoever my target reader is, and you are searching for whatever my key phrase is if you're doing something search-oriented. What are some of the questions that you might have, right? And then you just go back and forth with the thing, because you're going to get a lot of insight that normally you don't have access to the customer, right, or the reader. If you do, fantastic. Talk to real people, like 100%. But if you can have a conversation with the AI to give you that sort of feedback, and you can have that back and forth, you're going to have a lot easier of a time to really address what a real person might be asking, because we hear on the show a lot, figure out the intent. And the hard part is going like, well, if I'm not talking to anybody, like,
right. What's the journey? Just, hey, in general, map out the journey here for me. Right. And then you can figure out the points. Oh, wait, I want to learn more about this. And if you're not getting good answers from the AI, then go find a person to talk to and hear their story, or go to the communities. As I said, go to the communities, have conversations. Yeah. Another point that I want to point out, a lot of people who are working as writers are benefiting from being able to work remotely. And a lot of people who are remote workers are people who have disabilities and neurodivergence. And I'm one of them. And I find that cognitive load can drain you of energy to a point where you have no room for anything else in your life. And I find that using AI helps me offset that cognitive load. It's almost like an accommodation for me as a person with a disability, but also as a writer I don't need to have all of my cognitive space folded into writing an outline that's probably going to look like every other outline that trying to target for this keyword, right? Why not focus that amazing brilliance that I have into making that generic outline into something new and unique and helpful?
half of the show here. But outlines, I think, are a tricky one too, because yeah, I mean, you can just, a lot of outlines now with some of the tools that are out there are just based off of what other outlines or what other H2s are for other articles. And it's like, yeah, but how am I going to bring something new to the table with that? So having that sort of input, I think really does help. All right, let's move on to the next section. Tell me about your process from ideation to publication. I think we've touched on this just a little bit already, but let's get a little bit more specific and deeper into it.
Sure. So as I keep beating the drum on community, that's, again, connecting with communities, having conversations one-to-one or participating in hot LinkedIn debates. Those are the places where a lot of ideas happen for me. And from there, and also I should point out that I don't specialize in SEO. I'm a thought leadership content writer. But at the same time, it's like, but even I think at this point, especially with AI assisted writing, this is an opportunity to take SEI or SEO into the thought leadership space, right? So from there, I will go and look for inspiration outside of the business world, because we're talking to people who have lives outside of work, right? So, some favorite sources are like the types of podcasts that I listen to, or TV shows that I like, or ridiculous memes that like are capturing some kind of zeitgeist moment, or like even some like theories that I have about where things are going. Like I have the theory that with AI driven, or not AI, it's human driven, but AI generated content, there's going to be such a huge value placed on handcrafted things. So how do you double down on that handcrafted feeling in your content? So that's like sources of inspiration for me.
Can I just jump in for a second there?
Sure.
I think making that distinction too between the SEO oriented author versus and I hate to say versus, but like versus the thought leadership type author, I think that's really important, especially bringing in AI to the conversation, because AI can be a little dry, right?
Exactly.
So to say that it can assist in some of those things, I think is really important. And then if you're thinking of considering SEO as like a front door to get to that content, you're incorporating it into the entire process, which...
And this is my way of thinking about this is very much influenced by how animals often approached strategy. And they like basically have these content lanes of thought leadership. And then also, and here's what a SEO, a search driven strategy might look, because SEO is not a strategy, it is a tactic. But if if the goal is, hey, we want to increase traffic, SEO is definitely a tactic to use. If the goal is to increase awareness or be a category creator, then thought leadership is a really good venue to use. But and there are two different methods in terms of gathering the information and researching things towards SEO content and thought leadership content. And AI can help with both. So moving on to planning. So once I'm there, I kind of put my ideas out and kind of map it into like an editorial roadmap is what I call it. And oftentimes it's going to be, how do I prioritize these ideas according to, for example, at Writer, what are we launching that needs addressing? What are the big questions in the space that people are asking that we need to get ahead of right now? Where are the gaps in our, keywords, for example? So all of that is going to go into the planning. And then it's also all about the brief. It's all about the brief at that point. If you do not have a strong brief, you will not, it's going to take so much longer to end up with a publishable piece. So then you spend time on briefing. And then the other thing is, when I'm looking at my editorial roadmap, I'm also deciding where are the places where I'm just going to extract the most value through repurposing and distribution, either through repurposing existing content. Lately, I've been a fan of taking LinkedIn carousels and turning them into outlines for big rock content. And then, because we have to move really fast, it's kind of the opposite of what people are doing with repurposing, but we have to get stuff to market fast. So social is the fastest way to do that. And then also, where's the built-in distribution network here? If I'm partnering with you, for example, what's the topic that's really going to drive your authoritative voice, and I can help platform you and also benefit from you promoting that content. So those go into planning. And then creating, I already talked through that 10, 30, 90 process. And it ultimately, the goal here is to get things to a point where you really are able to play and bring a beautiful, engaging experience to your audience.
I love that you're talking about planning, like part of your planning process is the distribution, not an afterthought.
No.
Now, I do want to say, normally we talk about from ideation to publication, but, and this is a little writer plug moment, there's actually a really great way to summarize some of the stuff that's out there for repurposing to social media for distribution. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
I think so, yeah. So there's actually make distribution so much easier. Number one, and Tommy, you haven't gotten a chance to play with this yet, but I'm looking forward to hearing when you do. Once you bring like a draft to the editor interface in Writer, there's a button you can click called highlights that'll automatically generate meta description for your SEO. It'll automatically generate bullet point summaries. And on our blog now, we're starting to actually just pop those at the top of every post because we know people are just skimming through. And then it also generates automatically Twitter and LinkedIn posts that'll help promote it. Boom, done.
Yeah.
And then you can change it from there. And then you could like even copy that into the prompting tool and say, hey, take this copy and again, add some kind of flair to it, if you're trying to experiment with different types of voices and things like that. So that's one of the tools that I use a ton. Another thing that we have is the recaps feature, which we are doing a nice promotional launch on that this week, actually. And we're going to be doing a event recording repurposing webinar in a couple of weeks. So recaps, you can put in audio, video files, and I believe URLs that are YouTube. I don't know about any other URLs right now. You upload it to Writer, and Writer automatically generates takeaway bullet points. It will automatically break your recording into clips. If it's featuring those takeaway points, it has that bit in there. And then boom, it's ready to go to social. It's ready to go to your blog. It's not ready to go to your blog, I should say. No, because you as a human being are in charge. Do not put that beautifully generated crap automatically there. But I would say 80% of the work is done. And then you, again, layer your human point of view to it.
So before the call, that's actually the first thing that I started using because it's like the hardest part for me is coming up with the recaps, coming up with the bullet points. Like there's so much process involved with just creating the show that all of the follow-up and stuff is something that like that's the challenge, right? Scaling time is the big challenge, and I think that's one of the things that I'm finding the most interesting, especially since everything blew up like in November, and now like it's crazy. We do have a question here, and then we're going to get into your pregame. But the question is how do you move from being an SEO writer to a thought leadership writer? That's actually a great question.
That is a fantastic question because it's what I've done. So like I said, I started out in basically a content mill where it was just churning out SEO content within 24 hours type of work. But if you adopt the mind of a journalist while approaching SEO, I think automatically that helps elevate things to a level of thought leadership, because you're actively investigating where are things at right now, right? Where are the questions that people are asking right now, not just in general, but what are the things that we can bring a new point of view to on this topic? And that's thought leadership. I would also encourage you, shout out to animals, I keep mentioning animals, but they have brilliant content about what makes thought leadership. And transitioning from an SEO, you as a freelancer make that call. If you decide, you know what, I'm going to start working with my clients to capture their voices and their points of view and their editorial focus and their commentary, and I'm going to interview them, and I'm going to help encapsulate that into tweet threads, into LinkedIn posts, into reports, then you're a thought leadership writer. You don't have to ground yourself in one discipline. And that's what I love about freelancing, is just you are making your own path. So I would be happy, if anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I can point you to resources that'll help you learn a little bit more about that too.
I'm going to jump in on that for a second too, is that I think coming from a freelance perspective, because I did that for a very long time, and being in-house, right? It doesn't really, you come up with the same challenges no matter what, is that there are two problems, right? One, freelancers in particular, but even in-house authors feel like they have to ask permission to do that, to be a little bit more thought leadershipy. So there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had upward to make that happen. But then the other side of that is that a lot of businesses don't know what that voice is that they're trying to get out there. They don't know their own perspective on the market.
Yes,
or where
that's
they
true
sit.
Of startups especially.
Yeah. Well, I've seen it, and it's true of enterprise level companies. I've seen it with one of the enterprises that I worked with before, actually a couple of the enterprises, because they want to play it safe, right? So it's like, how dare we take a stance on anything when we can just, cover the bases, but not necessarily offend anybody or anything like that. And I think part of that is a little bit of, if you're in that place where that's the majority of the content that's being put out, is you have to be teasing those conversations out from people and really helping them to figure out what that voice is, or what their stance is on anything. Because Tracy Wallace, our very first guest on this show, said something that stuck with me ever since, which is thought leadership is not a format, it's an outcome. And I think that's great. So, but you have to know what you stand for before you can even dive into that territory.
Yes. And there's also different within thought leadership, just to kind of jump off of that. Counter narrative opinions are just one aspect of thought leadership. They are the ones that get the most attention because they're hypey, right? But there are other ways for you can use your proprietary insights from your data that you're gathering across your organization to produce beautiful content. It's not SEO. It's showing that you have a high level view of this industry landscape, and you're being the voice of the industry. You don't have to have an opinion about that. You can just spotlight your expertise in it. So if you're dealing with a risk-averse client or a risk-averse stakeholder, that's one venue that you can do, but it's still accomplishing a similar outcome, as Tracy says, which is setting yourself apart as a leader in the space.
Yeah, I think that it's, and a lot of people will say, a lot of leadership too will say, like, oh, well, there's no distribution. It's like, no, there's plenty of distribution, right? it's not search optimized, but there's plenty of distribution out there. This can be repurposed for guest posts. You can start throwing paid advertisement at it. So there's like a much broader conversation that needs to be had around that. And you have to gauge the temperature of where the client or your stakeholders or the business as a whole is at when it comes to moving into that as a style of writing. I don't want to say format, but yeah.
Yeah, but to give an example, my CEO does these very opinionated LinkedIn posts. And I will take those ideas and turn them in, I'll repurpose those ideas into, okay, but this is actually covering a topic that we are not doing in SEO right now. So let's take this, and then we're adding opinion to SEO. Oh my goodness, right? So absolutely, there's distribution channels for thought leadership and repurposing opportunities for thought leadership.
Yeah, and I think it's even, and I want to jump off of this, but social is definitely a good place to be putting that out there too. Like that's what a lot of the social media conversation is about. So there are definitely opportunities to balance it all. All right, so let's talk about your pregame, right? You've gone through, you've done the brief, you know where you're going to distribute, you have the basic idea, the piece has been created, you have the raw draft in front of you. What do you do before you edit? Well, we have editorial guidelines that basically are the litmus test to whether that or not this is a writer publish worthy piece. And I'll show them when we're doing our live edit, or I guess it's a live edit. We're talking through the edits that I recommended. I'm also, again, I stole a lot of ideas. I shouldn't say stole a lot of ideas. I absorbed and internalized a lot of ideas in my years at Animals. And I'm a big fan of having just an editorial checklist right at the top for me to it shows you step by step. Here's how you're going to look at it first. You're going to look at to see if it's skimmable. And then you go back and you look at to see if is it visually appealing. And then you go back and you see if, are there interesting elements to it, or does it feel generic? And there are some other steps that I'm missing right now, but it's still going. You're going to have to read through, but each time you're looking for one thing out of it, right? And then from there, so that's the pregame. It's just kind of setting up those systems for myself, and then you go into it. Anything else that I should be that I'm missing that you wanted me to cover for that pregame? No, I think that's about it. For me, I like to try not to edit as much as possible. I stand up, I sit down, I stand up, I sit down, and drink some water, and yeah. So it sounds like you're a lot more disciplined when it comes to that part of the process. It does. I mean, first of all, when I'm writing versus when I'm looking at somebody else's work, is it hard for me not to self-edit and just be comfortable with turning in that messy draft and having somebody else come in. It's a very vulnerable place, but it's wise to do that. I mean, you definitely walk away, come back, but I really do recommend that people invite a second pair of eyes, even if it's like a fellow freelancer. If you belong to a mastermind, that's a great source of feedback. But I really think it's wise for you to have somebody other than yourself looking at your work, because you're not going to learn anything new unless you have that. Or submit it to the cutting room, and then you can have industry-leading content marketing professionals edit your article live. So, all right, cool. So we're going to do the quick mid-roll ad here for Content Harmony. While we're doing that, we're going to also pull up the edit, and looking forward to walking through your edits. These are some of my favorites that I've seen so far. So I love your feedback style. All right, here we go, everybody. While we wait for the edit, I wanted to introduce you to one of my new favorite tools. It's called Content Harmony, and here's why it's my new favorite. First, I hate writing content briefs just because of how much time it takes. If you want to get the information you need, you have to bounce between so many different tools. You've got the keyword data from one tool. You need to use Google to see who you're going up against. You need to know what their domain authority is. You have to figure out the average word count. What's the keyword density? What are the search trends? And so much more. And let's be honest, we don't do it all because it takes too long. Now that's where Content Harmony comes in. First, all you have to do is upload your key phrases, and its AI-assisted tool will show you at a glance the search intent of each key phrase, the average word count across all the top ranking results, how optimized the average piece is, the average links to each piece, and the average domain authority across all the competitors. And when you click into a key phrase, you get even more detailed information, such as the search intent of each key phrase, the age range of the ranking results, the SERP features, and the keyword seasonality and trends. You can also do a topic analysis and see the keyword density that you should be targeting, the outline of each article that ranks in the SERP, questions people are actually asking with information from Google, Quora, Reddit, and more, and the common external links that people are citing, your top internal link targets, high authority resources, and recent news to keep your results fresh. Also, you can get way more detailed information on each of your served competitors. You can see what images are ranking and what videos are also going out there. And here's the cool part. All you have to do is click any of these elements and it will automatically populate a brief, which you can then share with anyone. And finally, once you get the first draft back, you can run it through their content grader and see just how well optimized the article is. Seriously, I just started using it and it's saving me at least 2 hours a brief and has consolidated 4 of my most commonly used tools. Now, if you want to try it out for yourself, you can run 10 reports for $10. Also, you can help support the channel and get 2 months of free bonus credits when you purchase the full plan through my link. All right, now let's jump back into the edit. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm looking forward to the edit here. If anybody has any questions along the way, please feel free to ask. And also, we will be putting the edit in the chat, or the article in the chat, in just a few moments here. So before we get started, please tell me your first impression of the article.
Of course, it was about AI for marketing. And we're at a point now where every AI company, including Writer, is writing about AI and using there's this whole meta thing happening that is twisting my brains, but sure, okay, let's do it. The other impression that I had was this is obviously an SEO driven piece that's hitting these certain sections that are very much about optimizing for keywords. And so I appreciated the structure in that it is anticipating questions that searchers might have about this particular topic. And then from there, I was like, what do we have that's new? What's a point of view that we're bringing to this? Where's this? First of all, I'm not sure who the audience is other than marketing, which is if we're taking a look at my little checklist at the top here, this is what I'm looking for: regaining context if necessary. I normally would be like, okay, so let me take a look at the brief and make sure that this is meeting the needs of the brief, right? Mm-hmm. So I knew that it was going to be for marketing people, but is this for a leader of a marketing team, right? Is it going to be for a leader at an enterprise company? Is it going to be a freelance marketer? Is it going to be an agency get specific about who this audience is. Because especially with startups in a very competitive space, there's a very specific ideal customer in mind. Because that's the only way we're going to differentiate is if we're speaking to their needs. So in general, my impression was strong structure. Yes, this is definitely an SEO piece, and it's not going to stand out from the millions of SEO pieces that are going to be targeting these keywords, and also written by AI. So radical candor right there. But And I also sense that a lot of this was generated by AI because of that. And if that wasn't the case, then let's talk about how we can make your writing stand out from an AI generated piece of content.
All right, there we go. Well, let's jump in. We've got the checklist here, which I think is fantastic. Can you just give like a brief overview of what we're looking at here? We don't need to go through point by point, but
this is one of the editorial checklists that we would use at Animals to determine, if it hits the marks of certain quality. But then I also layered in the elements of my editorial guidelines for Writer's Blog. So, and we can talk through what those are in a second. But basically, it's showing you step by step. All right, so here's what we're going to do first. We're going to verify that the keyword is in the title. Okay, I'm assuming that AI for marketing is the keyword here, but I don't have the context, so I just kind of cross those out. So we can go from there.
Okay. And then we verify that the article is skimmable.
We did, and there are some notes here, so I did not check it off, right?
Cool.
And actually at Animals, what would happen is if you didn't check off everything on here, because there's an editorial team that's there on top of the writing teams, right? Editors would be passing it right back to the writer and say, okay, it's time for these revisions because I couldn't check these off. And then it would have to go through a round of revisions, right?
Which is no fun.
No. And it's also a lot of pressure to get stuff delivered on time. So
yeah.
All
right, cool. Yeah, let's keep trucking along here.
Cool.
So if you want to scroll down, we'll actually look at the article and go into your first edit.
Okay, great. So, all right. So let's talk about the intro for a second. When I'm reading, I'm looking for a immediate hook that's going to get me engaged and say, all right, this person is speaking to me, my level of awareness and knowledge about this topic, and why I'm here, right? My note here was that, and you're going to see this a lot through here, is if you're making a water is wet statement to your audience, then that is not, it's not necessary. If people already know this, then don't write it again. Or acknowledge, hey, you might already know this, but that type of thing. You have to, again, it's a one-to-one conversation here. So the writing was, these days, marketing teams are constantly on the lookout for innovative ways to educate audiences, attract customers, and hit their goals. Well, that's what marketing teams are supposed to do. So how is it different from the old days? I'm not getting it. Maybe I'm taking this too literally, but I'm not getting it. So why don't we find a more interesting hook, right? Find an analogy. I'm a big fan of analogies. I show an example in my notes. In today's rapidly changing business landscape, which also sounds kind of marketing, I would change anyway, but still, the work of a marketer is like sailing a ship through a hurricane. Those are higher stakes, right? It's also agitating the pain. I'm using copywriting technique right there. Empathize with their situation or struggle that's leading them, again, the story is in the struggle, to this post. This is the introduction is the welcome mat, and it's setting the stage for everything else that's going to happen in this piece. And it's also an opportunity for you to bring storytelling from the beginning. And we are writers, we like to do storytelling, even when we're doing nonfiction. That'll bring narrative elements to the rest of the piece that you can refer back to. To use a theater format, I'm sorry, my notifications are going off. There's something in improvisational theater called the herald, where you have a motif or a theme that's set up from the beginning of the improv, and you go on all these tangential places throughout, but you're constantly doing a callback to that original theme, and it ties it all together. And there's an opportunity in the introduction to set up that theme. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. The other thing is second person point of view is so important with blog posts because it is a one-to-one conversation. And in business writing, especially, it's about persuading people. And you cannot persuade if you're talking to the abstract idea of the marketing team. Yeah. So those are my notes there. And it's a lot of thoughts for like 2 paragraphs, but those are 2 very important paragraphs. Taking a look here also, just to give a shout out to Writer. Writer is the one that recommended, I don't know if you can see it. It said, it seems like it recommended getting rid of this because it seems like weakens a sentence. But since we wouldn't be using that, I would be recommending to take out the sentence altogether. Then we would not be using that recommendation anyway. And I'll point out some other stuff that Writer's doing as a Chrome plugin. It's right here. It's saying get rid of the space, so it's adding a little bit of error correction to that. But we can take a look at some other stuff too. Ready to move on?
Let's go.
Okay. So I love and I should probably have left feedback, positive feedback, but I was very focused on corrective feedback for this one. I love it when there are table of contents at the top of it. As somebody, again, with neurodivergent condition, having that kind of direction and knowing what I'm in for is very important. Another aspect of this is, it's addressing what is AI marketing. I don't see any problem with having that question as a header. I realize that a lot of other people, it would be the header and thousands of others. But that's also an opportunity for you to be like, what's our twist on this? What is AI marketing? And then,
right.
In layman's, or not layman's, in plain language, for example, right? What is the hook there? How are we going to get people to say this is going to be more valuable than the Google definition that will show up without having to click into an article, right? So how do you do that?
I want to step in for a second there. This is also really important to the idea, like if this is a search-oriented piece and this might be somebody's like first visit, that's one thing. But if you have really tightly defined who your audience is for this piece in the first place, whether or not you keep this section is highly dependent on who you're going after. So like,
sure,
if somebody on this stream, for example, you or me or anyone in the audience were to see this, I'm tuned out, right? Like I know what AI marketing is. I don't need to, and maybe I'm the reader, maybe I'm not the reader, right? But like I might be if I'm looking to buy an AI marketing tool, then
but your search question might be, your search query might be different though. If you're looking, if that search intent is there, then this would not serve that search intent. But I'm assuming from the way that this is structured is that this is a very top of funnel definitional piece. But if we're defining stuff, and this is what I'm saying, instead of just telling people, show them, be their tour guide through this landscape. Don't just talk at them and parrot what thousands of other competitors for this keyword are going to do. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Let's keep going.
Yes. And this is also with the knowledge that AI will be consuming a lot of the search results now. So it's imperative that you do things that the AI cannot when it comes to generating content. Okay. So I say opportunity to show examples. Now, here I say there's an opportunity to show examples within this section, and then later on, there actually is a better opportunity. But it would be wise to say we'll cover some examples, something to keep the reader going into. We're going to show you what we're talking about, right?
Yep.
And then here's an opportunity, like it's saying most AI content writing tools and platforms are generative AI based, which means, okay, it's telling you what it means. But again, I said, act like the tour guide through the landscape of this space. Show it. There are all these charts now that are showing thousands of tools that are being put out there every day. this is part of that checklist too, is if there have to be visual references, you have to do visual storytelling in formats like this. And that's something I was surprised to discover when I was a team lead for an agency, is how many of the writers just didn't think visually, that they were just thinking in terms of words and not like, here, let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. Your role as a content writer is also, it's demonstrating to your audience, and using visual storytelling is just as important as textual storytelling. Oh, I just realized that I did not leave a comment here that I meant to, which is, here's a claim that I'm like, I sense a little bit of BS here, and I want to fact check it. And if this is AI generated content, it's super important that you fact check any claims like this. You are opening up your client or your company to risk if you are putting out claims that aren't supported by evidence. So make sure, and also you're building authority if you have external links to sources too. Okay, so here's an example of writer recommending that you add clarity to this. So you just automatically click it. That kind of, it acts like, again, a grammar checker, but there are other places where it's going to help you tune the writing to your brand terms and or style. And I'll point out when those happen in a minute. Okay. So one of the things that I said here in this section is, in terms of
just a little bit.
Yeah, this benefits of using AI marketing, have parity in each section, so that way you have an introductory section before you go into like these subsections. It establishes what are people about to see. It again makes it skimmable in case they don't want to go through all of it. It kind of summarizes things, and then so here's something that you can see. I'm just going to demonstrate this. Like, you could take this and enhance it using Writer's extension. So here you can simplify the language, or I could say, let's enrich this and turn that into the introductory sentence. Yeah.
Can you scroll down just a little bit now? From where we have it cropped on the screen, we can't see everything.
Oh, sorry. I'm not seeing what you're seeing. Okay, so here I am. And again, I don't necessarily think it would be the best spot to do this, but just to show you what I'm talking about. Here, Writer is coming up with language, and you can transform it. So here are some of it's basically summarizing this, but the point is, it will generate language for you to, if you needed to build out that idea a little bit more. Yeah. So if I were to say, you know what, I want to build out this idea a little bit more, I can use enrich to do that. And also notice how it's actually agitating things a little bit more. Most exciting and promising benefits of AI marketing. So it's adding a little bit more emotion to it. Yeah. So there you have that.
Love that.
Okay. So one of the things I recommended here, my comment here is, an AI chatbot can answer these questions, right? I mean, honestly, that's what you're competing with. This content is competing with GPT-3 and Bing and whatever else, what other chatbots are going to be introduced to search soon. That's a whole other conversation there. But you have to make this more human, relevant, informative, and engaging. So let's bring these benefits to life with stories of businesses that have realized the benefits. You can use customer stories from your own company if you're an AI product, or you can find case studies from AI writing platforms that are, if you're just writing about the space in general, but you're not an AI platform. Go find some, they have case studies all over the place. Trust me, front and center right now. Writer does too. So that's an opportunity there. Okay, so this is this is a structural little nitpick. If you're using how to, most searchers are going to think that you're going to give them a step-by-step process of how to implement something. Yeah. But what follows in this section is just exploring the many ways that people can use AI. Yeah. So I would recommend changing the name of this particular section instead of how to 10 ways or however many ways there are.
This goes back to your scannability comment from earlier.
Exactly. And keeping that structure consistent. I also said, okay, so if the previous section was like, let's give examples of businesses, of how businesses are benefiting, like real world examples, then here's an opportunity to bring in SME quotes about how they're using or the ways that they're using it in their processes. So you go from company level to individual level. Yeah. And again, that's making it more, taking a more journalistic approach to the content as opposed to just trying to fit things to a certain format that a lot of people replicate. Looking at this. Oh, I said this particular point, which is about the fact that it won't, anything that you generate with an AI tool is not publish ready. You have to add your own human touch to it. That this is so important, it needs its own section. And later on, there is an opportunity to use that, but whoever wrote this under challenges of using AI in marketing kind of skipped over some of these challenges or risks. So I'll have feedback on that later on. Here's another water is wet statement. I think at this point, if you're looking at AI for marketing, you probably know the difference between blog writing and copywriting. I don't think that's necessarily necessary to the discussion here. But if you're saying copywriting is one of the most important aspects of any marketing campaign, why is that?
Right.
And also, discussing, but it can also be a lot of work, especially when you're dealing with tight deadlines and a large volume assets. That point actually gets repeated later on, almost verbatim, which makes me think that maybe AI generated this thought. And then we have, and then the other part is, if you're talking about copywriting, understand the process of copywriting, because the writing isn't the most time-consuming part of copywriting. It's the research, it's understanding, it's getting into the heads of your audience. And I studied copywriting, I did copywriting, and also worked with Joanna Wiebe, Copy Hackers, and she would say the same thing. So that means, again, this is about doing your research as a writer, of understanding what this process is, because yes, it can help with these things, but there are other aspects that are even more valuable to copywriters than generating copy. If you're a copywriter, you want to have something to help you amalgamate all of this information that you're gathering from audiences, and AI can help summarize interviews. It can help gain insights from, if it can read live URLs, which Writer can do. It can help you distill a LinkedIn profile down to like what the pain points are for that person, it's that persona. So there are other ways to use copywriting tools. And if you're actually studying your audience, then you'll understand why there's more value than these particular benefits. More water is wet. Yep.
We do need to wrap it up.
Oh,
because
sure.
We are a little bit over time, but that's quite all right. I would love to, this will be going back later on out to the audience. There we go. Hold on just a moment here. There we go. All right. No, this is terrible. All right. There we go. Yes, if you could stop sharing, that would be great. And I do want to say thank you so much for coming on. This was, if you could summarize everything that we were saying here, what?
I think there is so much anxiety right now over the aspect how the world is going to be changed by AI, and specifically how the marketing world and how our careers are going to be changed by AI. And I think that if you lean more into the human aspects of what you bring to your role and understand how AI can assist with amplifying that and scaling it, then that anxiety gets relieved a lot. You have no control over how other human beings that might not have the same values as you uh, respond to AI, but you do have control of how you master your craft, and you have control over um, the points of view you bring to your work. And that's all you can do, regardless of what factors are being in the marketplace. So that's what I would say.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. I had a great time. And I think that there's a lot to learn. I'm definitely going to be looking forward to rewatching the episode, and I'm going to be going through it a handful of times because you made some very, very salient points about just where we're at now and where it's going to go. So I think that's really cool. We are going to wrap it up. Oh, wait, we have one more question. Do you think AI tools will learn to add the human touch down the line as we add more quotes and stories to our content? Which AI can be trained on?
Yes, and yeah, it can be trained on your best content, your customer stories, and there will always be new ones and new approaches and imaginative takes that are fueled by the human imagination, human creativity. So yes, it will learn, but it will always be learning from human creativity, not replacing human creativity.
I'll have to be really afraid. Um, so, uh, no, I think it'll be. I think you're right. I mean, we're gonna do our best to train it in the way that we speak to speed up our work, not necessarily to replace us, and definitely not for companies to be replacing writers in general. And if they are, then those aren't the companies that we want to be working with, either in-house or freelance, right? So I think that's really important, and I think any business that's worth the salt really knows that as well. So yeah, let's wrap it up. I did want to say thank you so much again for coming on. I really appreciate it. If you want to check out Content Harmony, you can go to the link here. You can see the contentstudio.com/harmony. You'll get 2 months of free bonus credits. Also, if you would like to get the draft for this article, and on Friday, we're releasing an entire database of the articles that have been published before that we featured on the show, go to the contentstudio.com/thecuttingroom, hyphens in between, and you'll get that, all the bonus replay episodes, as well as some exclusive offers that have been from some of our guests. So again, thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day.